You can
I am.
usually
So
you can share the host, or you can give somebody the right to host.
It says it's now streaming live on custom live streaming service.
Now we're live.
Okay.
Andy, your
right.
last name is wrong on your.
An extra J.
Sorry, I didn't notice it earlier.
Yeah.
You can usually you can share the host, or you can give somebody the right to host.
It says it's now streaming live on custom live streaming service.
Now we're live.
Okay.
Andy, your last name is wrong on your.
Everything sounds like it's looping.
Somebody's playing YouTube.
So whoever's playing
sorry.
YouTube, please turn
That's
that off.
me. That's me. Sorry,
Yeah,
it
because I can
cuts
hear
on.
a conversation from about a minute ago.
Yep, sorry, that was me. I forget when you hit live, it puts the feed on there. So that's why we're here now. It's like I don't understand what's going on. So all right, we're good to go.
Good to go. Okay, at 7:05, I'll call to order this meeting of the MVWSD School District Board of Trustees, and we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the
United States
of
America.
to the republic for which it stands, one
One
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all.
Just
Thank
give
you,
me
everyone.
Tamara, give me 1 second to mute everybody and turn off the unmute function. So that way they have to raise their hand. So give me 1 second, please. All right. All right, we should be good. Were you all? So you've been unmuted. Where is Tamara? There you go.
Okay.
I think we should be good. It keeps saying to ask to unmute, so I think everybody that was in there before muted is good to go.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. We'll start off now with item 1B, the roll call.
Ellen Wheeler.
Laura Blake.
I have Ellen
Laura
Wheeler and
Blakely.
Laura Blakely.
Devin Conley.
Jose's on mute.
He can't unmute himself yet. I think after the first time you can.
Jose Gutierrez Jr.
Thank you, Trustee Gutierrez. And Tamara Wilson, let the record reflect that all 5 trustees are present. And we'll move on now to item 1C. And before we have the approval of the agenda, I'd like to note that item 3A has been pulled from the agenda for lack of clarifying language. And that should reappear in the next board meeting. So if I could get an approval with that amendment.
I make a motion. Oh, go ahead,
Go ahead.
Trustee Wheeler.
Well, I was going to say so moved, and I would also like to note either here or under consent that we have a revised personnel report.
Okay, so we're approving the agenda with item 3A removed and as well as a revised personnel report. And it was first motion by Trustee Wheeler.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Conley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Wheeler and seconded by Trustee Conley, the approval of the agenda with those amendments and modifications passes unanimously. Now is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items that are on the closed session agenda. Are there any members of the public on the phone or in the waiting room? I see a single phone number here that would like to address the board at this time.
I can ask right now. So this would be phone number 206-501-997. If you have a item for this topic to talk, please let us know. You've been unmuted.
I have nothing at this time. Thanks.
Oh,
Camera's muted.
Trustee Wilson's muted.
Thank you. It looks like if I mute myself at all, the now default setting is that I cannot unmute.
All right, hold on. I'll change it back, and then we'll just have to be diligent about muting people. So give me a second.
Okay. Yeah, I just
All right, so we're back to the original setting. So you should be
So
able
now
to.
if you need to, you can unmute yourself freely. One is currently muted outside of myself and Dr. Rudolph. So since item 2, we have no members of the public wishing to address the board at this time, we'll move on now to closed session at 7:09.
Are we gonna have a breakout room?
Yep, give me a second.
Time to go.
I'm still waiting. Okay, here we go. I think it's one at a time. Thank you for all your help, Nancy.
You're very welcome.
Join.
Okay, it looks like we're waiting on, I've got all my 5 trustees. And let's see. Hold on, folks. Is everyone here and ready?
Yep, we're ready to go.
There we go. Okay, at 8:13, we will reconvene this meeting of the Mountain View Whitman School District Board of Trustees. I'd like to report that no action was taken during closed session. We'll move on now to item 5, the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be approved in one motion. If discussion is required, items may be removed for separate consideration. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded by trustee Wheeler. I see you're muted, but I'm getting better at reading lips. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and a motion made by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Wheeler. The consent agenda passes unanimously. And we'll move on now to item 5A, communications from employee organizations. Are there any members on the line, Dr. Rudolph, who'd like to address the board?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and then so we'll move on to district committees. Any representatives from district committees?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, and then superintendent.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I just want to let you know that we have another community update coming in about 2 weeks. I believe it's August 7th or so. We'll be pushing out the dates. But really, I want to take this time to talk about a couple personnel changes. I want to thank everyone who was involved in the interview process across the board with interviewing these fine candidates. And considering just the time and everybody's waiting to hear about reopening. Normally, I know we give them an opportunity to speak, but if they speak, I'm just going to ask that they speak quickly so that we're already running a little bit behind. So first, I want to introduce Huff teacher Megan Henderson, who will be the district's new equity coach. As you know, this has been a strategic goal of ours. It's definitely a passion. And although we tabled this the last time in our survey that we put out both in staff, we noticed that there are some definite opportunities of growth for us. And so Megan has not only taught at the college level, but she also has been very passionate with this work and has done a lot of work behind the scenes with the Museum of Tolerance. And has, as well as leading some wonderful lessons at Huff Elementary. And so we're glad to welcome her as the new equity coach. If you quickly just say a couple things, we'll move on to the next person.
Yes, I just want to thank you, Dr. Rudolph, and thank you to all the Board of Trustees and everybody who's part of the interview process, and for most importantly, making space for this work. I really look forward to the future with this particular position. Thank you.
Great. So moving on, I want to introduce Swati Duggar. She has been principal at Therkoff Elementary, and she is now the district's new interim director of curriculum instruction and assessment. We're really excited for, she's led redesigns in Engineering Focus Academy. She's been very focused on STEAM. She also has worked as principal in academic affairs at various schools throughout the community. And so not only does she have sort of a business background, but she also has an HR background too. But we're really glad to have her working with our coaches and talking about how we can increase engagement. So Swati, do you want to say anything?
Just thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And I'm glad to be a part of the wonderful team and continue to make a difference for our kids. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Replacing Swati is Michelle Williams. She will be the new principal from Therkoff. She has the unique distinction of being speaking the most languages that I know of in our district in terms of administration. Although she will say she's not fluent in all of them, it is, with Therkoff's changing demographics, it's great that she can speak, or at least hold conversations in multiple ones. She has joined us from sunny Southern California, and she developed a strong literacy improvement program as well as social emotional learning programs through diverse professional development practices centered around online tools. And so we are glad to have her to continue the work that Ms. Duggar started, but also to continue to take Therkoff to new heights. So Ms. Williams, I'm not sure if she's still with us, but if she wants to say something, she can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Rudolph, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be part of your learning community with Mountain View Westman, and I just hope to carry the torch that Swati Dagar has carried throughout the years. And so thank you for welcoming me, and I'm excited to support the kids in the community of Therkoff.
Great. I want to welcome a Mountain View native, Tricia Lee, who is actually driving through the forest, and it looks like she's rejoined us again, but she's in El Dorado Forest earlier, and we told her to keep driving just because of the cell phone reception, but she's so committed to us that I guess she found another cell phone spot. But she is joining us as a new principal of Montaloma Elementary School. She has worked in Milpitas at both as a teacher as well as as student activities director. She's also been a middle school and elementary principal. She recently was principal of Santa Cruz Gardens Elementary for the past couple of years, and we're really excited to have her here to connect with our Montaloma families.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so honored to be able to return back to the Mountain View community and serve the community as best I can. Thank you.
All right, great. And wrapping up, I would like to introduce, and I know, Miss Claudia, I am going to mess up your last name, so I need to practice this a little bit more. My tongue obviously is not that nimble, but Miss Claudia Olakrigu, she can correct me in a second, but she is the new principal of Gabriel Mistral Elementary. She was raised in Colombia. She moved to San Jose as a cultural exchange teacher in San Jose Unified. She's worked next door with several of our employees. And in addition to that, she also been a principal of a dual immersion school in Morgan Hill. And so we are glad to now have her as a part of our team.
Claudia, you're still muted.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. I'm very excited and happy to be part of a wonderful and amazing team. And I look forward to working together with the teachers and the parents and looking at those wonderful students so that we can make things happen. Thank you very much. And I will teach everybody how to say my last name.
How do you say it? Say it one more time for me.
So it's very phonetical. It's Ola Si Regi.
Hola, Siregi.
Perfect.
Hola, Siregi. All right.
Siregi.
Hola, Siregi. Got it. There we go. All right, great. Well, so we are super excited to have everybody on board. Thank you to the parents as well as the staff members and the district office staff and the principals and other administrators who were part of the hiring process to bring these talented individuals to our district. And so we're super excited.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Rudolph. We'll move on now to community comments, and this is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. We ask that speakers in normal circumstances submit speaker cards, and I'll say this now, and also for anybody on the line who'd like to speak and make comments after the reopening plan is presented. I will set a time limit on those comments, and it will be based on the number of hands raised that I see at that time, just like similarly as I would do in a regular in-person board meeting. Usually we have yellow comment cards that are submitted, and we take those and stack them and count them and figure out how much time to allot each person. We're trying to do sort of the similar approach in this virtual setting. So I just wanted to clarify that both now and when we have questions after the presentation. So are there any members of the public who would like to address the board at this time? I'm seeing a no head nod. So with that, we will move on now to item 7A, the reopening under stage 4. Dr. Rudolph.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're glad to be talking about reopening in some type of fashion. And so what we want to do is create some clarity around stages 3 and stages 4 and sort of go through a couple of items here and then sort of talk about what, provide a little context as to sort of why we have settled on stage 4. So again, our guiding principles always are about keeping employees and students safe. We want to be nimble to deliver instruction under any of our, what we call our 4 stages. We want to create high quality, equitable learning environments for all students. And then obviously we want to spend time involving our community in solutions planning and implementation. So just to provide a little context here. So June 26th, right before our last board meeting, there were 3,984 new cases. I think I talked about this a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, we climbed to 7,000 cases. So almost a little bit over 2 weeks. And then obviously the death toll has sort of increased. And then obviously in a matter of days, and I want to point out, and I think Trustee Conley has brought this up in previous meetings, that these are lagging indicators, right? So the numbers that are reflected in this do not account for the people who have just taken tests. But what we know now is that on July 19th, we're at 7,456 cases with 177 deaths, right? So there's been a steady increase, or so almost an exponential increase in the number of cases across the board. And then if you go to today, you see that it's almost another 1,000 cases. And unfortunately, there's been a couple more deaths, right? And so what we know moving forward is that we are definitely seeing a spike, which is one of the reasons why we are on the watch list, or our county is. What's even more concerning are a couple of points here. The first one is the unknown presumed community transmission, which means that 72% of the cases that they are determining, they do not have a clear idea of where the cases are coming from. The second point that's a little concern is that Latino families are being impacted by this at a larger percent per population than any other group. And then the last data point here is that between the ages of 20 and 59 is actually where the biggest surge is actually taking place. And this is actually where the bulk of our workforce
Dr. Rudolph, I believe you're frozen.
Now you're muted, but you're not frozen.
Was I frozen before?
Yeah, you basically have to start over.
All right.
We heard you until the point when you said the bulk of our workforce, and then after that we lost you.
Okay. All right.
Yep,
I'll keep
being
my
in that
camera
age
off.
group.
Yep.
20 to 50.
All right. So you can hear me now, and everybody can see this?
No, we can't see it.
You can't see the, oh, hold on one second. Okay.
All right, awesome.
All right, great. All right, so I have my camera off. Laura, you are actually at the top of my screen. So at any point, if there's an issue, can you just sort of give me a thumbs down or something like that? That way, because I only have one box up there. All right, thank you. So the bulk of our workforce actually falls within this category. And that's obviously a area of concern. So when we asked the county to break down the number of students or cases by youth, and so there's a couple of caveats here that I want to point out. The first one is that youth actually have not been tested as rigorously as adults. And part of that is because we've been closed. And so kids have been able to interact in very limited cases. But what we do know, if you look at other illnesses, we do know that kids are vectors for them. So even if kids present asymptomatic, or if they present with the respiratory illness or other areas, what we do know is that there is the possibility or the sort of a concern that kids can transmit, especially to the population that's seen the highest increase, which are 21 to 64, which is where our workforce is. But what's even more concerning is that as we have started to open up, what we're now starting to see is a real rise. And so I'm going to point to this green line right here, which is ages 9 through 12. And since we have started reopening right before July 4th, you can see a steady exponential climb in the number of kids who are 9 through 12. And there also has been an increase in the number of kids who are 5 through 8. Now, I'm not saying that that means that, you know, kids are definitely, or I'm not trying to play epidemiologist and try to say like kids are going to present with the disease or not. It's just simply to point out that we are seeing an increase in these numbers, and we should be mindful that this data is telling us something. We've heard a lot of comments about the number of cases by zip codes. So what you can see in this, this guideline here is that right around us, so in the middle of the city, we actually are seeing an increase. But in parts of closer to the Wistman area, right near Sunnyvale, you can see that area is blue. So there are higher numbers per 100,000 than there are in sort of the North Bay Shore area, the other part of Central, and sort of the where Mountain View High School, MVLA, Huff, and Bub sort of areas are, right? So there's, in the middle of the city, there is a steady increase in the number of cases that we're starting to see. And so that just gives us a sort of a local perspective. And so obviously there was new guidelines given by the state. And as part of those new guidelines, we have to stay off of the monitoring list. And unfortunately, we haven't made it off of the list just yet. But as you can see, in essence, we have to remain off the list for 17 days before we can actually start reopening. So that just to put in context, right? So you have to be off for 3 days, and then it has to be a 14-day clearance, which really totals 17 total days off the watch list before you can start the reopening plans. So going back, and you've seen this a couple of times, there are 3 different options. There's all on campus, there's blended learning, and there's connected. On July 2nd, we believe that we could do the hybrid or blended learning model, which would have been B, and then we asked parents to look at C. And A is really stage 2 and stage 1, and it wasn't being offered at this time. Based off of state guidelines as well as the county guidelines and sort of where we are with the data, we are now looking at only C, which is distance learning at home. And so we are going to talk a lot about this in a second, about what distance learning looks like. And I want to point out, like, the slides or the information I'm about to give has been in previous presentations, but it hasn't been focused on because we were very optimistic a couple weeks ago that we would be able to do a hybrid model, which is also part of the reason why we sent out the survey asking parents what their preference was, right? And so now that we are focused on connected, we're now back to square one, which is talking about how is this going to look different than what it did previously. So again, 4 stages. We also created a color code just so people could sort of understand it. But let's dive into what distance learning is going to look like. So first, we are looking for guidance about what mobile feeding looks like. And we're making a determination as whether or not we currently, under the guidelines, mobile feeding can only happen at certain sites. We're feeding about 3,500 meals a day. And that doesn't include partner agencies like CSCA, Hope's Corner, who are also doing mobile feeding programs. But obviously, this is a big concern of ours. And as soon as we get more guidelines, we will know whether or not we can do feeding actually at all of our schools, or whether we'll still be relegated to simply doing it at our Title I schools. It does mean virtual learning. It means online instruction, and also means remote tests. So how is this different? That's probably the biggest question that people have been asking. So the first one is, all of our programs are going to follow grade level standards. Unlike previously, we will have synchronous lessons. So teachers will teach through live through Zoom, and I'll be talking about that a little bit, as well as they will be doing small group instructions, and they will also do ELD, and there'll be some independent activities, right? So in a second, as I go through the schedule, you'll see there's a mix of the teacher starts off with a live lesson, then they do some, and then kids are sort of sectioned off. Some will do independent work, some will do small group work, and then they'll come back to do some check-ins again, and then that sort of repeats itself several times. There also will be social emotional sort of check-ins at the beginning and end of the day, just to sort of create community. And our principals will be doing work to create community across the board. There will be some lessons that are asynchronous or recorded, although a majority of it will be live through Zoom. And then part of that is because we want to make sure that kids are getting all of their lessons, but on any given day in a normal classroom, kids are not taught every single subject every single day. And so we want to just be mindful that it's possible that we can do things like social studies and other classes, sometimes live and sometimes asynchronous. Daily attendance and assignment completion is required. State Bill 98 is very clear about this. Parents do have to engage with the school. During distance learning, we do have to take attendance, and we will be providing grading and feedback. Elementaries will be standard space. We are working on what that looks like, but parents will have access through Power School. We also understand that oftentimes, when we do grading for elementary schools, it occurs at the end of the trimester. But because State Bill 98 requires for ongoing feedback, we need to make sure that we're doing it. So that we're going to have a mechanism within Power School that happens. And for middle school, they will continue with the grading system of letter grades, but they also will do this in Power School also. So parents will be able to see both the attendance as well as the daily records. And that's been a source of contention across the board. When we closed on March 13th, the board made a strategic decision, offered a recommendation of staff not to provide grades because we weren't sure how we were going to go through, how long we were going to be in this state. But what we've now realized that if we plan on doing distance learning effectively, and the feedback we've gotten from both teachers as well as focus group parents on focus groups and the community check-ins, is that not having grades also allows certain students to sort of disengage. And in order to create continuity, our goal is to try to get to reopening as safely and as quickly as possible. We do want to follow a daily schedule. We want kids to be in a routine so that when we open the doors, we're not putting a true culture shock to kids across the board. So you'll see us talk about, especially at the middle school level, that there is this routine. We want to routinize, acculturate and routinize different types of activities for kids. So every kid is going to be provided with a Chromebook. The youngest kids also will have styluses. The middle school kids do not have styluses in theirs because they've already been issued theirs. But moving forward, every Chromebook will have stylus. We have handwriting apps that we have purchased and ways for students to submit documents back and forth to their teachers. Hotspots will be provided if needed. We are currently handing out hotspots to students in need. And then we also now have sort of worked on a partnership with Comcast, and we're reaching out to AT&T to see if we can do something similar, that if a family is actually in an apartment and needs a hotspot because of financial needs, that we'll be able to pay for the actual Comcast or AT&T network within their house and provide with a router under the Comcast Essentials program, and really save the hotspots for those who are in unstable housing because they're so hard to come by at this point. We will do one of the best practices, both from teachers, administrators, and from parents, is we will continue with the dashboard that is updated weekly. And then as part of our system, we've trained all of our employees on how to do Google Classroom. We'll be using using it more robustly, but Google Classroom is the process by which we will transfer items. I've talked about the daily check-ins already. Wednesday will consist of Zoom check-ins and check-outs. And that's when you'll start to see some of the asynchronous learnings in order for teachers to get preparation, professional development, and as well as have the staff meetings. There's been some conversation about, well, why are we giving teachers a full day? I do want to point out that one of the things, if we were under our normal circumstances, we actually would do a half day on Thursdays. But considering the circumstances and sort of as we continue to gather feedback and sort of the newness of
Dr. Rudolph, we can't hear you anymore.
We can see the screen, but we can't hear you, Dr. Rudolph. Looks like he's coming back on.
I think we're trying to pull Dr. Rudolph back online. Can everyone hear me? I see Laura.
Yes.
Thank you. I still can't hear Dr. Rudolph. Where is his icon? I see 2 Mountain View Wistman stars, so I'm not sure. Both of them are muted. You may need to be unmuted by the host.
One of them's me.
All right,
Okay.
There we go.
There he goes.
Yay.
All right. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so gotta go a little old school here. So if you give me a second, I got my phone going and I have my computer going. So Nancy, how about you do this? Can you, let's see here. I'm gonna share the presentation with you since I've had this issue a couple of times. It's at the top of your box. If you could go ahead and pull it up, and we're going to go super old school, and I'll just say next.
Okay.
And I'm not sure where you were because I was talking full steam ahead. So technically, I think I've hit slide 60, but I want to say we're probably on slide 17.
Okay. Hold on a second. Sorry, it's a lot of slides, so it's taking a little bit.
No worries.
Okay, almost there.
If only we knew somebody in the city of Mountain View who could help us with all these technology issues. I heard there's a little company right down the street who may be able to help. Maybe a couple companies.
Okay.
Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome. Thank you for your patience.
Here we go.
Okay.
All
I
right,
do
so
think
we're-
it's slide 17. I'm just
Oh,
looking
Nancy,
at the
are you? No,
PowerPoint.
Nancy, I want you to pull up the Google document and share from there. Sorry.
I'm sure this isn't the first Zoom meeting people have been in where there have been technological difficulties.
Okay, this is the one at my top of my list.
Yep.
Let's see if I've got it. Are we good?
Perfect. Yep. All right, so let's hit slide 17. And then we hit the present button and we should be good to go.
Okay.
Yep, that's where I left off. So
there we go.
What's that?
Nice.
okay, perfect. So the question here is, did you hear any of this information whatsoever? Go back.
You
to one
did. You
slide,
talked
Nancy.
about hotspots. You talked about Google Classroom. You talked about check-ins. I think we heard
Okay, so
Wednesdays. We did not talk about IEPs. We did not hear IEPs.
Oh, okay, great. So for IEPs and 504 plans, one of the big concerns that we have is that we have to meet we have to adhere to the individual education program. So we are working out a system to provide testing for students as well as to meet the accommodations that will take place in person if they cannot be done virtually. And so we are currently working on how to address those kind of needs, as well as the protection that is needed in order for this to happen. Next slide, please. And I'll be talking about IEPs and 504s a little bit later. You went too far. Okay. So, support for families. Obviously, if you need equipment, we'll make sure that we get it to your home. We have new Parent University website with technology, how-to videos and manuals and tips on how to structure learning at home, assist communities, resources for meals, mental health, and housing. Obviously, there's going to be staff support required for attendance and engagement. Part of State Bill 98 requires that if a student is not engaged for 60% of the time, that we have to have a plan of action, what we call a re-engagement plan. And so we're currently working on what that looks like, as well as the workflow. And we have to submit that workflow process across the board. We also are looking at new channels for parent support, such as WhatsApp chat groups and Facebook groups. And we are in the process of providing, especially for essential workers or for those individuals who have to work, we are currently close to 396 spots between the YMCA and Right at School that we are working on to provide all-day childcare within our schools. And these spots will remain the same, even in the event that we open in a hybrid model. We're using every available classroom that is not used by a teacher to make sure that this could occur. And we will bring them in. YMCA and Right at School have been wonderful with agreeing to allow for a different staggered approach to make sure that we keep our numbers down in terms of the number of students that are coming in. Next slide, please. So let's, no, too fast. Was that the next slide, or did we skip past one?
No, that's the next slide.
Okay. So what does this look like? So this is a draft schedule. So we're going to start today, every day, regardless of what time your school starts. We're going to start with a Zoom check-in. We're going to get all the kids together, and we're going to see how things are going. And then from there, similar to what a regular school day is, there's going to be a series of classes throughout the day. And at the start of every single class, there will be daily live instruction with the exception of Wednesday, so that you can see what happens. I'm going to show you what this looks like in a second for an individual class, but students will have ELD, ELA, social studies. They'll have a quick break. They'll do math. We'll break again for lunch. Then we'll do PE, similar to what we did before. We'll have STEAM, RTI, and then there'll be another group checkout. So part of what State Bill 98 required is that we could lower the number of minutes, but we could not reduce the number of days. So we are lowering the number of minutes so that we can sort of do those social emotional learning check-ins that we need and sort of try to build community as best we can. Next slide, please. So we want to drill down to, you went two. So again, so what should you expect as a parent? Every single period, whether it's ELA, social studies, math, PE, or STEAM, you are going to have some type of live whole group lesson from the teacher. And then after that whole group lesson from the teacher, you're going to have some small group instruction by Zoom. There's going to be some independent work. There's going to be different activities, problem sets, and then it's going to be a whole class debrief and exit tickets, right? And PE, similar to what we currently have, you'll have a rotation of PE and CSMA and art via Zoom, as well as Living Classroom has even stepped up to find ways to do virtual living classroom lessons across the board. In STEAM classes, normally we mix students, but in this case, STEAM lessons will be for half of the class via Zoom, and that will also enable teachers to do small group intervention or enrichment with the other half of schools. Next slide. So what this really looks like, let's dive a little bit deeper into our ELA block. Again, this is a sample schedule, but the ELA block starts off at 8:15 after our morning Zoom check-in. Students are going to have this sort of whole class mini lesson on Zoom. There may be some closed reading, some writing activities across the board, and then it's going to break into two sort of sections. There's going to be some independent work with video lessons, consumables from out of our workbooks, which parents will be able to pick up at the very beginning of the year, along with the Chromebooks and other materials. There's going to be some independent reading, some independent writing. And then there's going to be another half of the group that is going to be doing small group-led activities, closed reading, guided reading, intervention, enrichment across the board. And that is going to repeat itself every single period or almost every hour on the hour, right? It's always going to be whole group lessons. Then it's going to be some teacher-led groups, and then it's going to be some independent work that has to take place. Next slide. So the STEAM RTI model will continue during distance learning. We will continue to divide students as sort of into groups 4 days a week. So this is just for STEAM and RTI. Group A will engage in STEAM lessons through Zoom. Group B will engage in small group intervention or enrichment activities through Zooms. Wednesday will be the day that the STEAM RTI teacher plans with the classroom teachers, and then those groups will rotate daily, providing 2 sessions of STEAM or teacher RTI per week, which is similar to what we have, right? So our whole goal here is really to recreate the daily activities across the board. Next slide. Yep. So what does the middle school schedule look like? Again, our goal here is about, with staying with one of our stated goals, which is being nimble. We also want to make sure that we create some continuity, right? And so we're going to keep this staggered start times across the board. Now, there have been some parents who said, well, why are our kids starting so early at 7:55? That actually is the regular middle school start time. There's been no change to this whatsoever, even though the board approved a later start time. That later start time does not take place until later date. So as it stands right now, we wanted to create the continuity. So what we have here is, again, these are sample schedules because it sort of rotates depending on what group you're in, but you will have ELA, you will have math, social studies, science, as well as an elective that is on a rotating basis. And then there is a 6th period, which is targeted support and additional electives as well. So the targeted support is for our special ed, it is for our ELD, it is for students who are sort of in needs. And then there's additional electives that can be scheduled during that time. What we've heard loud and clear is about the amount of time that we've asked kids to check in. And I think all of us will agree that as we do Zoom meetings, there does come a point where we sort of get a little tired. And so instead of having 8 periods per day, we've opted to go to the 5 or 6 periods. When we move to in-person days, the 6th period, certain students will leave and then other students will stay on campus. Why is this important to have it staggered? Because as we start to open our doors and bring students back in through the hybrid model, we need to be mindful of the passing times. We need to be mindful of how many kids are coming in to a particular school at a given time. And so we're trying to stagger this as much as possible. Next slide. So middle school, the schedule actually looks exactly the same. All classes are virtual. There's additional supports I've already talked about. Again, I want to stress that unlike the previous time, there are live synchronous lessons at almost every hour on the hour at the start of, or for middle school, at the start of every single period. And again, it is as a combination, it looks similar to what we see in the elementary schools, which is you're going to see, you're going to have a small group lesson, a lecture, some type of activity, or sorry, not small group, a large group activity, and then it will break into small group lessons across the board. All right. Again, Wednesdays are used for check-in and check-out with teacher lessons. It also allows staff to do meetings, professional development, collaboration, as well as teacher planning. And what is different this year, even if we were to reopen under stage 3, there are certain electives that we can or cannot offer. And so in order to make this schedule work, we actually are going to create what's called the wheel. As a former middle school principal, the wheel is simply you give kids electives, and those electives change every trimester. And so kids are going to be part of the wheel, so they sort of get exposed to all of those. But we also, during that 6th period, will allow kids to take more advanced level courses too. So that way they're not missing out on the true experience, but they are getting sort of a broad experience across the board. Again, students are going to be required to turn in work. There's going to be grades. There's going to be feedback that's going to be provided. And then part of this is that in order to make this schedule work, we are reducing the number of, for some students, we're reducing math periods from 2 periods down to 1. And I want to point out that not every single student actually received 2 periods of math every single day. Next slide. So what does the sample daily lesson looks like? So you can imagine a whole class attendance and lesson that starts off via Zoom for about 20 something minutes. And then you have this sort of divergence of independent work and small group led instruction with students, and sort of a bounce back, right? And so this is a sample of a math lesson across the board. And then there's a whole class debrief and exit tickets that are actually going to be done. And that helps us to determine how kids are sort of progressing. Next slide. All right, so when we think about stage 3, one of the things that we're thinking about is, and I want to talk about this because I want people to understand, it is possible if we get off the state checklist that we can go into a hybrid model. And so we want to be I want parents to understand what they're signing up for, because we are going to send out another survey to all families asking for you to sort of commit to one of those options, so that in the event that we come off the watch list for 17 days, that we will be able to really adjust almost immediately, right? And so that's part of our goal. We're going to continue to track the data across the board. And at the next board meeting, we're going to talk a lot about safety protocols. We're going to talk about sort of what happens when a kid gets sick. We're going to talk about, what data are we tracking in order to make these informed decisions, right? But we're going to continue to watch the data across the board. Next slide. So safety is our biggest priority. We are disinfecting across the board. I think I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we are going to make sure that regardless of who you are, whether you're an employee or student, that things are going to be safe, right? My expectation is that when Eli walks through the door, he is going to be treated safely. He's not going to become a vector and bring something home to me. And I think that same expectation should be for me, as when I go to work, I don't want to bring anything to Eli either, right? And so because he's about to turn 9. So he is going to be right in that age group that we saw this big spike on, in between 9 to 12-year-olds. And so I want to make sure that whatever we do, if my goal is to keep Eli safe, then my goal is to keep every single student safe, right? What I expect for him is the exact same thing I expect for everybody else. Next slide. So we have purchased PPE. We actually now have yet another mask that we purchased based off of feedback that we have. So kids will have, we have cloth masks for employees. We have now masks that allow you to see someone's face. We have those for both students as well as for teachers. We have face shields that people could use. We have thermometers. We have cleaning. We have bought any type of PPE that we believe is going to keep our employees safe, and we will be using those to our fullest extent. Next slide. I've talked about this before. We're upgrading our MERV 13. We have a checklist that we'll be publishing in the coming weeks that talks about all the things that we're doing based off of CDC guidelines to make sure that we're safe. And we are prioritizing outdoor learning spaces as part of Measure T. We're not mandating that teachers go outside because obviously we don't want to create working condition issues, but we are looking into, so how do we create these outdoor learning spaces for us? Next slide. Okay, so again, everybody's heard this before. Stage 3 is a targeted approach. There are some days that are virtual and there are some days that are in person. Students will be grouped into A and B sections, but there are going to be some students who are going to be allowed to come every single day. And that is based off of different types of needs. So let's jump to the next slide. So how do you opt in or how do you opt out? Again, at the beginning of August, we will be sending out yet another survey. We need parents to understand that when you choose approach, you need to be committed to sort of that approach, and you will have the opportunity to move in and out. But what you can't do is that the state guidelines and the county guidelines are very clear that we must maintain stable cohorts. So if you are assigned to A or a B day, cohort A or cohort B, if you do not show up, then we cannot include you as part of that stable cohort, right? And so your child will be moved to distance learning. I do want to point out that also part of this is that when we move to stage 3, the state has actually provided guidance that if a student, and there's only a couple sort of exceptions to this, but if a student is not wearing a mask, they also will have to go to distance learning across the board, right? And we'll be talking about that as we get closer to distance learning, to stage 3. You will be assigned a teacher. You will have both in-person instruction and small group instruction. Again, distance learning will continue in the same format, except this time the lessons will be by virtual team on an asynchronous approach, and teachers will be doing the check-ins throughout the day, and then sort of it bounces back and forth. Again, daily attendance and assignment completion is still required, thanks to State Bill 98. And then, of course, we are staying with the feedback and grading assignments. Next slide. There we go. So what does this look like? If you are in cohort group A, you are on campus on Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you are in group B, you're on campus on Thursdays and Fridays. We've actually, I know oftentimes holidays fall on Mondays and Fridays. We've actually looked at, does one group get an advantage over the other? And the answer is actually no, based off of the number of holidays and weeks that we have. So we feel really good about allowing Wednesday to be sort of the middle of the week sort of check-in and provide students with an asynchronous format from there. Parents will have the opportunity, if when we move to stage 3, they can choose to keep their kids on, put their kids on the same rotation, or they can choose to have them on different rotations. So we want to be mindful that there are different needs for parents, and that's been made clear to us from parent feedback, either through focus groups or community check-ins. Next slide, please. Okay. So the middle school schedule stays exactly the same as it did previously. Again, when we want to be able to adjust and be nimble, and if we look at what the data says, and part of the reason why we moved the start times back, most fifth grade parents, when they surveyed, were perfectly fine when we did the middle school survey with the sort of the earlier start time. We're keeping it this way primarily for one reason, and that's to stagger people, right? We need to make sure that Graham has close to 1,000 students this year. We need to make sure that we are only bringing students in on a limited basis, which is why we have this staggered approach. But at the same time, we are also making sure that as they go to the bathroom or they transition, that we don't have too many people outside, right? And obviously when they are outside, they actually have to wear their mask, and we have to practice social distancing across the board. Next slide. Similar to the elementary schedule, students again will be on a 2-day cohort A, cohort B, staggering start time. Siblings can be on the same schedules and we'll coordinate that if a parent wants it to. But one of the pieces that you need to understand is that a cohort of students is actually about 15 students based off of social distancing. If we reduce social distancing down from 6 feet to 3 feet, then we can actually get about 20. But right now the guidance is to maintain the 6 feet social distancing. RTI will continue, and for those who need it, and we will continue to have daily live instruction, which includes whole group lessons as well as small group supports. Next. Again, especially for middle schoolers, one of the big pieces that we've heard is the need to require for work to be turned in and provide feedback. We need to make sure that we're mindful that we have staff meetings and professional development and allow teachers with collaboration. Advanced electives, and I talked about this briefly, music and Spanish will be offered on Wednesday afternoons when we move to stage 3. Students are scheduled according to their math class. And one of the things I want to point out is that on Wednesday, August 19th, we will be retesting all of our students. And that information occurs almost instantly. And then from there, if a parent still would like to see their child in a more advanced class, then they can have a conversation with the middle school principal to talk about placement, review all of the data, and ultimately student placement is a determination that is made by the principal. It is not a determination that is made by district administrators or district office administrators. English language learners and students with disabilities will stay on campus for 6th period so that they can have a targeted support. And then students will have a virtual Zoom check-in across the board. All students are a part of the elective will, and PE, because of the guidelines, will be delivered virtually at the end of the day, either for the 6th and 7th day or before school for 8th grade. Next. And again, this is just sort of how does this look? Group A on Monday and Tuesday or in person. Group B for elementary or in person, and then you go opposite for the groups. Next slide. And then again, RTI will continue. I've sort of touched on this a little bit. STEAM lessons, students will engage in STEAM lessons through Zoom on their online days, Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. Students will engage in small group intervention or enrichment with the classroom teacher. Next slide. So there's a couple of other considerations. So when should in-person school learning close? So the state came out last Friday, with some clear guidance. And again, at the next board meeting on August 6th, we'll be talking about this. So a classroom will get shut down if there is a confirmed case. And we will send out notification, and then contact tracing will actually occur through the Santa Clara Department of Public Health. However, if 5% of a school has cases within multiple cohorts, then actually the school has to get closed down, right? So if you think of a school of 600 students, if 30 kids have present positive at any given time during a 14-day period, then we have to shut the whole school down. If 25% of the schools close down within a 14-day period, then the whole school district actually will close. Next slide. No, we're back. We went too far. There we go. So staff will be required to be tested daily. The state has given us guidelines that 50% of staff will be tested every other month. And so, or every month, 50% of your staff has to be tested. And so we have worked with El Camino to provide testing at the start of the school year. And even in distance learning, we are going to require this actual testing so that we know that we can bring people back in the event that we get off of the state watch list. And then obviously the state contact tracing workforce will prioritize schools once we open. Next. Okay, so go back one. So there's been a lot of conversation about waivers and how do we apply for them. It's the previous slide, Nancy. So a waiver is a waiver may be granted to a local by the local health officer for elementary schools to open. And I want to be clear, right? So it is the waiver is for the actual whole school. But here's the caveat, right? So we need to consult and get a letter of approval by our labor unions as well as parent and community organizations before we can actually request the waiver, right? So there are multiple groups with different concerns who are going to have to agree that or agree and provide consent, written consent for me to request an actual waiver. And then that officer must also review the local epidemiological data and consider other health interventions and consult with the California Department of Health when considering a waiver request. So it's not just I can unilaterally put in a waiver. It is a conversation and a lot of consultation and a lot of agreement from different groups in order to make this work. Next slide. So to date, we have spent close to $3 million, and we've actually, this is when this presentation was created. We are now beyond or close to, if not exceeded the $3 million expenditure amount. So we have purchased PPE, touchless thermometers, electrostatic sanitizer machines. We OT, occupational therapy, cleaning before schools, food and nutrition services, hotspots, Chromebooks. We've increased our tech coach. We're adding 6 distance learning teachers for the 2021 years. And then we've also increased the number of staff members who can respond to technology issues that parents are having across the board. And also because we're going to move into a one-to-one environment, we need to make sure that we can support all those devices. Next slide. So for supports for students with for 504s, as well as for students with disabilities, we will provide interventions to students requiring intensive educational supports, and we will maintain continuity of accommodations and services while also adhering to the health and safety policies. And so if you have a question about what those what it looks like, those are really individual questions. And I ask that you reach out to your school site and work with the principal to sort of gain the understanding of those. Next slide. So how does this work? If in stages 3 and 4, there will be a virtual meeting between the principal and the teachers within the first month to determine accommodations for all stages of learning. Those accommodations will then be conveyed to the teachers. And then there will be appointments with classroom teachers or counselors on an as-needed basis to support students. Once we move to stages 1 and 2, again, you have the same meeting, but this one includes counselor teachers across the board. And then obviously those accommodations are sort of relayed. And then obviously any one-on-one appointments on a monthly basis as needed in order to support kids, right? So again, our goal here is to make sure that the continuity of services looks exactly the same to the best of our extent possible, regardless of what stage that we're in. Now let's talk about students with IEPs. Next slide. So the individual schedule, instructional schedule for special ed. So under stage 4, it is virtual for R. We are exploring the possibility of bringing certain groups, our specialized academic instruction classes in. Again, it's to meet the requirements that is mandated by the federal guidelines, but we're working with our teachers as well as with our SELPA to sort of make this happen. And if we are able to provide in-person services, then obviously we will have even more enhanced safety protocols for those employees. Once we move to stage 3, our special academic instructional classes will attend 4 days a week and practice social distancing. And we will have PPE for staff. And we do understand, especially in our SAI classes, that there are students who may not tolerate PPE. And so that accommodation, if the accommodation is already noted, we'll make sure that takes place. In stage 2, they attend 5 days a week, similar to everybody else, but we're still maintaining social distancing across the board. Students who are in the general education program with services, again, it is virtual for all under stage 4. Again, we're exploring the possibility of providing certain services across the board: speech, OT, SAI, vision, AAC, and clinical therapy. And those will take place at the schools. Not every single service will be taking place. We have provided all of our we are providing all of our instructional assistants with devices too, so that they will be able to support those students who they are assigned to with additional support, so that they can check in and provide the assistance as mandated by the IEP. Once we get to stage 3, unlike the SAI classes, students in the general education will follow their peers and will attend 2 days a week in cohort classes. But then we also will have specialized academic instruction in resource rooms that will be in person on the virtual days, right? So depending on what your IEP services are, you could attend 2 days a week with the cohort. And then on the virtual days, you will actually come in to receive your special education services as mandated by the IEP across the board. And then once we get to stage 2, we're back to 5 days across the board. Next slide. Assessments. So we are going to start doing in-person assessments across the board if state guidelines allow. If not, we will try our best to do virtual assessments. We've been doing virtual assessments across the board, but there have been some parents who have agreed to wait because they would rather have the in-person, but we want to make sure that we're following the guidelines. And so we're still waiting some more guidance from the state. So if we do it, we're designing special testing areas for our students and families. There will be temperature screenings. There will be face shields and masks that will be worn. There will be similar to when you go into a grocery store, there will be dividers, plastic dividers between the person who is doing the test as well as the students. And then obviously there will be no sharing of materials between students across the board. Students will take their materials with them. After students assessed, we will thoroughly clean the room, the tabletop, the doors, anything a student puts their hands on. And then we also use the ionized machines to disinfect the areas. Next slide. All right, so our recommendation, the board has already granted the superintendent the power to earlier this year to sort of close schools. But what we are asking is that you approve our school reopening plan, which consists of 4 different stages. Stage 4 being a complete closure, which is digital learning. Stage 3 being a hybrid model. Stage 2 being open with restrictions, and stage 1 being full reopening. And please understand that the caveat as of today and as of last week, basically because we are on the county the state's watch list, that we will open up on August 17th under stage 4, unlike as opposed to stage 3, which is what we anticipated previously. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. We'll open it up first to questions from trustees, and then we'll move on after questions from trustees to questions from the public, and then finish with comments from trustees. I'd like to again state that when we get to community comments, similar to what we would do in a regular in-person board meeting, we have the number of hands that are up in the participant chat box. I use that to calculate against how much time we can allot per speaker. So once that's done and extra hands come up, it's very challenging without taking away from the folks who have been waiting patiently to add people in at the end. It's of no fault, but this is the technology space we're working in. So with that, we'll start off with questions from trustees.
President Wilson.
Yes.
President Wilson, just real quick, once we get there, there are 2 comments that were actually sent in too. So I'll read those based off of the timelines that have been, the timeline that you sent.
Perfect. So we'll add those into the number of people and the timeline. So we'll start off with questions from trustees. I would just like to start off by saying thank you to Dr. Rudolph and as well as the staff and everybody who has working tirelessly to try to modify plans. Just 3 weeks ago, we were in a hybrid model, and we could on the 17th of August show up. And a lot of parents were excited about that, and a lot are disappointed that we now won't be doing that. And we have parents across the spectrum, both wanting in-person instruction and both not absolutely against sending their child into school. So we have a lot of needs, and I think it's next to impossible for us to meet them all. But having said that, I've heard from a lot of parents, and I'd like to hear some clarification, because the parents are coming up with really creative ways like, oh, we could try this, or we could do 1 grade level, or, you know, we could do that. And I just want a little bit of clarification, Dr. Rudolph, on the role of our unions and our bargaining units in their role in either implementing some of these creative solutions, because we can't just do a single grade level because of some of the barriers. And if you would just talk to that really quickly, I think the public would appreciate it.
Right. So we are currently negotiating with MVEA right now. And, you know, obviously all of us agree that we want to make sure that we have kids in the classroom, but we need to do it in a very safe and safe process, right? So part of the reason why we're going to be talking about this is at the next board meeting, all the things we're doing and present the checklist that we have that's been adapted from CDC. Is to highlight all the things that we're doing to make sure that employees are safe. And we want to make sure that these are visible changes, right? When we walk into schools, or it's not schools, but when we walk into stores, you can tell that there is something different than what it was previously, right? And we want the exact same thing to take place at our sites. But at the same time, you know, we have employees who are very concerned. And I think this is true across the nation. You know, this is true up and down the state, who are concerned about their safety and health, which is part of the reason why we're focused on this. At the same time, you know, I mentioned this earlier, that in order for us to open up in a hybrid model, sorry, not a hybrid model. In order for us to open up in a hybrid model, we have to be off the wait list, off the watch list for 17 days. But in order for us to focus in on a waiver, we actually need consent from both of our unions as well as parents, right? And that's what I've talked about that a little bit. And that consent must be written, so we need to include it. You know, and in terms of goal is to recreate school as much as we can in a distance learning environment, right? The more we deviate from that, the more we sort of try to upset the apple cart with these very creative ideas that are being given, the more we have to negotiate, and the more that working conditions start to present themselves, right? And so we need to be mindful that we have employees who, you know, are doing a Herculean task of trying to tackle these particular issues. But every time we change the ball, the bar, right? We have to have some type of consideration for what is the impact on working conditions. And so that is one of the big considerations that has to be taken into account. So it's not, unfortunately, and really it's not unfortunate, right? Because, I was a member of the 101, the UAW 101 right up the street in Oakland, California for Ford Motor Company. So it's not, unions are here to protect their employees' rights. So I'm not bemoaning that, but we are also not a private school. We're not, our teachers bargain. So we can't just simply say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. What I do want to point out though, is that also private schools, charter schools, even sort of these home schools, that are daycare centers, are all, anybody who is providing education is subject to the exact same regulations that the governor talked about, right? So no one is going to get a free pass. Private schools have to adhere to the same guidelines, and if they plan on opening up, they have to consult with their teachers. They have to consult with parents and everything else, right? So all of us are in the same boat, which is we have to make sure that when we open the doors, it is going to be done in a very safe manner, which is why we are going to be talking a lot about over the next couple of weeks. Here's what we're doing to make sure the conditions are safe. And it's also why we're working hard with our unions to make sure that we are taking into account the working conditions that are required as a result of distance learning or the hybrid model or anything else. And that's a behind the scenes conversation that, we don't want to make public, because we want people to have a safe space to really sort of express their fears and for us to do some problem solving across the board.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. And just to reiterate, the same sort of union consent is required for the waivers. A lot of people are saying, why can't you just do a waiver? Like maybe X proportion of Mountain View parents would opt to send their children to school and think supply a waiver. And it's not that simple. I just want to make sure that you folks are aware that it's not what we want. It's that there are whole institutions involved in getting on board with decisions.
Correct. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. We don't have enough data on the impact of COVID-19 on our youngest students. We haven't tested them at the same levels that we've tested adults. So, and to be honest, I mean, we don't know. I mean, I just read some research maybe last week that said that we're not even sure the vaccines that are producing these antibodies, that the antibodies stay with those who have been vaccinated, right? And so now there may be the need for additional boosters. We're learning so much about this. And I think Dr. Fauci said, this, he said, COVID-19 is breaking every single mold that we know about viruses and communicable diseases, right? And so we need to be mindful that, yes, while kids are not presenting at the highest number of cases, at the same time, we haven't tested kids at the same level that we've tested others. And we do know, as I mentioned earlier, that kids are vectors for illnesses, for flu. That is a proven data point, that kids are vectors for the flu. And the R naught for COVID-19 is about 5. I think the latest study I saw was 5.8. That puts it right in the neighborhood of polio and smallpox. Right now, it doesn't mean that the fatality rate is just as high, but it just says that it is that infectious, right? And so if that is the case, then we need to be mindful that if we were to apply for a waiver, that we got to take into consideration of what our teachers are talking about and the concerns that they have. And I think there are some valid concerns about, are they going to be impacted, or are they going to be put at risk? And our goal as an organization is to really assuage those fears and make sure that parents such as ourselves, as well as staff members, feel safe about coming in, and they feel safe about that we're not putting anybody in harm's way.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Questions from other trustees? I see every hand up. I don't know where to start. Trustee Conley, we'll start there.
Thank you, President Wilson. So, I have 5 questions, and I'm going to move through them quickly as fast as I can, because I know we all have a lot of questions. I am incredibly privileged. I am a credentialed teacher who is not working right now. And when I look at this schedule for my son who's going to be in second grade and all of the time that he's going to need to be present online, I am intimidated, right? So I know that there are parents who are single parents, who both parents are working, who may have lots of other things going on in their lives right now. And so I would like to know, how much screen time are we expecting our children to have? And with the synchronous lessons that are going on, if there's a child that is really struggling to interact with the online curriculum, are those synchronous lessons recorded? Can they watch it? Can they submit their work by the end of the week instead of the end of the day? Like, how are we going to meet students and their interaction with screens where they are, and still meet these state requirements about completing work?
So a couple of things. First, and I mentioned this earlier, we're working to create options for families who need to send their kids in to schools because they have to work every single day, right? And so while most of those spots will be concentrated at a couple of sites because of the amount of space we have at those schools, it is going to be an option for families to take in. And we are prioritizing those who have either essential workers or who have a demonstrated need that they need to come in. And we know that that there are diverse needs across our community, and that there are certain subgroups of our community who need more assistance than others. So we are mindful of that. When we're thinking about the amount of time that a kid is going to be on, so if you think about in the schedule I had before, it's an hour-long lesson, and somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 to 15 minutes of that lesson is actual live learning. And then from there, you have workbooks, you have other activities that kids can do sort of independently, and then there's sort of another check-in right at the end. So, I would, estimate that it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 to 25% of the day you're actually connected with the teacher. And then the rest of the part, and it depends on the lesson, right? It depends on the topic, it depends on how kids are doing. But the rest of it is sort of this: you can engage using the curriculum that we're sending home or the consumables that we're sending home. You can jump into small group settings, which are a little less intimidating than having the 20 individuals, right? There's RTI periods, so like all of that is sort of a better approach than just a kid watching a screen all day long. So we try to be mindful of that. And those lessons vary from time to time. So I would say if you're estimating about 20 to 25%. I think the second part of this is that State Bill 98 is very clear about student engagement daily, as well as student engagement on assignments, right? So we have to do daily attendance. And we do need to make sure that a student is engaged meaningfully 60% of the time. If it is less than 60% of the time, then we have to come up with what's called a re-engagement plan. And we're still working on what that re-engagement plan looks like, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is there are opportunities, or there are considerations both from the state as well as from us that, there's only so much screen time a kid can take. And we're trying our best to figure out what that correct balance is. And we'll be tracking it based off of the data and based off of teacher feedback. But as we go, it's really going to be sort of a moving target, right? It's going to be, we keep adjusting the sort of feel to get the feel for it. I think the things like the Zoom check-ins that are more the social stuff, I think that's an opportunity if a parent is seeing that they're, if your child is sort of at his wit's end or he's been on there for too long, then there's an opportunity that maybe you're not doing the Zoom check-in, right? So you can reduce the amount of screen time because there are other things that you can sort of do. We've also reduced the instructional day, the amount of time in the instructional day, so it's not the full 7.5 hours. It's a shortened period, and then of course we put in breaks as well as an hour-long lunch, which is longer than what kids have. Also taking into consideration that kids just need a break. So as we planned, we've tried to take all of those concerns that we've heard from parents as well as teachers into account. moving forward. And then, this obviously is an ever evolving conversation. So we just need to sort of figure that out as we go.
Thank you. I mean, even as a teacher, there were times when I would give an assignment to a student and it would come back with 2 words instead of a full sentence. Like this idea of how we turn in assignments for elementary students. I think the more we can think through that and try to communicate clearly with each family, that each teacher reaches out and figures out where kids are and what supports they need and how they're interacting with the curriculum. There may be alternative ways that we can develop to demonstrate interaction with the curriculum and completion of assignment, because I think we're going to have, from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade, I think we're going to have kids all across the board who interact with the technology differently.
Right. And, one of the things I just want to point out, so we purchased the professional version of Seesaw for our youngest kids, because that also gives students the opportunity to sort of engage differently with the curriculum. And while the platform that the kids will access it is through Google Classroom, they will go to Seesaw and they can turn in audio or video lessons, they can write documents. And so that was one of the best practices that came from teachers as well as principals and parents. Like, we need to make sure that approach happens. And that is taking the account the executive functioning skills of our youngest kids. But also, I had one of our pre-K teachers who was on employee town hall, and she said, look, can we send materials home, right, to kids so as I'm demonstrating how to use this manipulative, they have it at home. And I'm like, of course we can, right? And so sites are working to determine what the supply lists are that we're going to send home so kids can interact with those materials too, so that it's trying to recreate the in-person environment as much as we can, knowing that there's really no replacement for it.
Okay, so question number 2. So I've been following the county data really closely. I'm listening to all of their check-ins. I'm going to all the meetings. And when I look at the math and I look at our hospitalizations, I look at our case counts, I don't want to freak people out, but I would be pleasantly surprised if we are able to come back to school in person before 2021. I'm worried that we're not going to be able to get off of this state monitoring list before cold and flu season starts. And once it starts, hospitalizations go up regardless, and we will be stuck on this monitoring list until March. So with that long timeline in place, I'm curious about why we would send out a survey in August to ask parents to pick between option 3, where there's a hybrid learning model, and option 4, where there's full distance. Like, that seems extremely premature given the data. And tied to that, if we do get off the state monitoring list for counties, which takes 17 days, would there be a period of like a week or 2 while we configure classes, we revamp everything, and then we pull everybody in? What would that timeline look like?
Yep. So 2 things. So part of the reason why we want to send out the survey earlier is we're trying to think about the continuity for kids, right? And so what we don't want to do, and unfortunately, because of the errors, and I'll own those, right? Because of the way the survey was sent out, because of the data that we got back, because of what parents sort of figured, well, I don't want to lose my home school, so I'm just going to choose it even if I don't plan on showing up, right? That's put us in a weird predicament where I would prefer for your child to have the same teacher from start to finish. I don't want to have to turn back around and assign your kid to a new teacher once we get to hybrid, right? And so the best approach would be, we have a group of teachers, not only the virtual learning team, but we also have other teachers who have signed up or who are teaching completely virtually, who we can assign your kid to regardless of the school that they're at. And that those teachers stay with your child from start to finish at the end of the year. And if we could do that, that seems to be a better approach than what will happen. And we've seen this, I was a principal at every single level, and I've never met a kid or a parent who was appreciative of having a kid change a class midstream or mid-year, right? So that's part of the rationale as to why we want to do that. The second thing is, and I'll just say this, you know, if you listen to the experts, we could kick COVID-19, even though the R0 is pretty high, and even though it was going to require about 85% immunity in order to do it, right? What we do know is that if we do social distancing, if we wear masks, if we wash our hands, if we do these things over the next couple of weeks, we can actually see a decrease, right? And so if the community banded together and, you know, stop politicizing wearing masks and doing these health safety things and just simply bought into, you know what, this is necessary means to ends, then we could possibly be open before then. So yes, I hate to say this, right? Because I want to be the optimist and I want to say, yes, we're going to be able to do this. We're going to be able to open sooner rather than later, right? But if we continue on the trend that we are, you know, we may be talking about longer than March. We may be talking about a whole year lost if we just don't buy into the things that our health experts are saying. And so, you know, we really need to do those types of things. So that's part of the reason why we want to do the survey over again, to get people with the right teachers, give us an idea. But it's also why we want to stress, if we do the right things as a community, we could possibly open up a little bit faster within the county, right? And I know it's hard because it's summertime and we all want to just sort of relax and enjoy our time because we've been cooped up. But these things are really necessary in order for us to move forward.
So how long would the time period be if when we get off the wait list? What's the time period to moving into a hybrid model?
So, you know, optimistically, I would love to say it would be tomorrow. Like, you know, we get off the wait list and the next day we could open up. But I would say it probably will take us 2 weeks to ramp back up to full hybrid learning. And, you know, it could be a little bit faster, but it's going to require, we got to bring staff back. We have to do some acculturation for staff. And then we have to bring in students and sort of phase them in and cohorts and stuff like that. So, you know, we obviously part of our approach right now is to prepare as if that possibility is going to happen and try to bring people back. But I don't see it once we hit the day 17. Then I think we can start bringing staff back. Once we start bringing staff back, you know, probably the week after that, we should be good to go.
That is extremely helpful because I know a lot of people are dealing with childcare, and building on childcare, I'm seeing like within 24 hours of Newsom announcing the monitoring list school closures, thousands of people on the peninsula joined social media groups planning pandemic pods and learning pods, and families are like trying to band together, and some people are exchanging childcare, some people are hiring nannies and teachers, some people are not a part of these groups at all and are being left behind. And I'm getting a lot of questions about, can the schools or school districts take any role or participation in helping people organize sort of family help pods? I've reached out to Supervisor Simidian's office about this as well to get clarification for families about what the county considers safe, what regulations might be. I haven't heard back yet. From a school district perspective, like, is there anything we can do, or are we really limited by liability issues?
We're really limited, and that's not an area that we can get involved with. You know, it's definitely not an area that we're, you know, if that's what a parent wants. I mean, you know, as a parent, I'm going to make the decision I believe that's best for Eli, Kayla, and Camille. But, you know, it's not one officially as a school district that we can take. Our goal, though, is to provide as many resources as possible. So, you know, especially for those who need to work, that's why we're looking at, you know, opening up a very large swath of classrooms for daily interaction for families, knowing that there are some families that are going to choose these pod options. So, but we just, that's not something that we can do. And it would open us up for liabilities that we wouldn't be able to sustain.
And then 2 quick detailed questions and I'm done. So one, when we say all the PPE for teachers when they come back to the classroom in stage 3, does that mean they'll be wearing their cloth mask and a face shield?
So we actually just found, thank you to Chief Academic Officer Bauer. She sent us a new PPE face shield. So we have cloth ones, we have face shields, but we also have the ones where you can see somebody's voice, or not voice, because technically you can't see that, right? But you can see their mouth moving. So teachers can choose between any of those 3 options. You know, we've never really figured out a correct solution for the speaker system in our classroom. So I'm not sure if people remember, but under Measure T, before I got there, we installed all of these speakers and microphone systems to sort of have teachers broadcast their voice in a classroom. They've never really been used, but now these are actually tools that we could use in the event that a teacher decides to wear a mask as well as a face shield. We're still waiting for greater guidance on which one works best. We know that the state said that face shields were sort of allowed, but there is research that says that the face shields may not be as effective, and that you need to wear the mask with them. And so, you know, we're hoping, you know, as we learn more in terms of sort of how the transmission of this disease goes, or this illness goes, that we get a better understanding of what the appropriate approach is. But we believe that having all 3 of these right now puts us in a perfect position to, you know, when it's time to open up, that we can open up safely and provide PPE. There are some districts that don't even have the face shields, or they don't have the cloth mask. They're waiting for the state to send them to them. And we were very fortunate. We jumped on this train real early to have those devices in. And so we'll make sure that it goes out to people.
And then last question, on our website, we have a page that is coronavirus updates. And then we have a page that is planning for reopening. And it's sort of like the coronavirus updates ends and then the planning page begins. Is there any way to sync those up? Because even when I Google MVWSD coronavirus, I end up getting confused about what I'm trying to find. Is there a way to connect those 2 so the information is more clear for people?
Yep. I'll talk with our team. You know, that comes out of the office of the superintendent. So we'll sit down and talk and look at the possibility of merging the 2, and see what works, what doesn't work and stuff. So we'll let me go back to the team and sort of talk. It's a good piece of feedback.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Jose got dropped. His system died and he's on hold on the phone line. So if somebody can let him in, he's
not showing up just yet.
I've already let him in.
Oh, okay.
Thank you,
great.
Nancy.
Do we know his phone number, or at least the first couple digits?
650.
Yeah, it's a 650. I think it's a 785 number. I'll reach out to him, make sure.
Okay, we'll move. Trustee Conley, I take it that was your last question. We'll move on to other trustees. Trustee Blakely?
I just had a couple of short questions. One was, I think the last plan I seen for stage 3, we had sort of alternating days, like Monday, Thursday, and then Tuesday, Friday, or something like that. And now we've got Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Is that for cleaning purposes that we changed that?
Yeah, yes. So we need to, as we bring different groups in, we need to be able to do some deep cleaning before we bring another set of students in. So that's why Wednesday was the day that we chose. If we weren't bringing 2 different cohorts in, then we wouldn't have to worry about that. But because we are, that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question had to do with the waiver process. I've been trying to dig around in the guidance. I had been under the impression that it might be possible to seek a waiver if we were able to get parents and the bargaining units to agree for certain teachers who were willing to come in live, perhaps to teach live for, small cohorts of, especially like kindergartners or kids that were just harder to teach by distance learning. But I think you said that can only be by a whole school now, that it's not something we could just opt in.
So the waiver process actually says for elementary schools. It does not say for specific subgroups. And so we are getting in contact with different groups. The County Office of Education, Santa Clara Department of Public Health, as well as CDE, to determine whether or not there are special considerations. But at our current interpretation, as well as our legal interpretation, is that it's only for elementary schools and is not for specific subsets.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Wheeler?
Okay, thank you. So one of my big questions was answered in Trustee Conley's questions and Dr. Rudolph's answers, and it was about students who don't do well in front of a computer. And it sounds like you're doing what you can, you're working this through, but I'd like you to continue to pay attention to those kids. It sounds like you're going to have teachers checking in on them, but and I hope it works better than it did in the spring.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different considerations that we have right now, right? So, one of the big ones is that there's feedback, there's grading, there's daily live instruction. So I think that sort of creates a different learning environment. But also, we will be repurposing a lot of different staff members to help us to keep kids engaged and sort of meet their needs where we can. And so we're going to do everything within our power to sort of help kids along with this journey and families.
Thank you. And then my other question is regarding middle school electives. I'm thinking about music, I'm thinking about choir and band and orchestra. Can those be done virtually so students could sign up for those classes and not be next to anybody, just do it in their own home?
We are going to offer the advanced courses virtually. From a scheduling standpoint, just because one of the considerations that we took into account was the amount of time that kids are going to be engaged in this online. We're putting kids on the wheel in order to make things work. But that sixth period will be for students to, if they choose to do chorus or something else, they'll be able to do it from the house. What we need to just be mindful of is that as we transition back, those classes will look a little bit different, almost like a flipped approach, because chorus is one of the classes that right now the county says you cannot have in person. So it would have to turn into sort of a more music appreciation class. And then on the virtual days, it ends up being a sort of that in-person sort of class. But we are working our hardest to find a way to find a solution for those classes so that kids are exposed to them.
So, and then also regarding middle school electives in general, have you developed a list of what those electives will look like?
Yes. So we have each middle school, the middle school principals are working on that. on what the wheel would look like. And they're also looking at how many sections a teacher has. So both of those are under consideration. And as we finish up the schedule and roll those over, we'll be able to put those out. I want to say that both Ms. Swati, Kathy, and Tara have been working with the middle school principals and may be able to shed a little bit more light on this.
Thank you. And last question, this is a classic question. I don't know the answer to it. Do we have Spanish teachers for both middle schools?
Carmen or Tara, you want to, I believe the answer is yes, but I don't want to speak and say something wrong.
We have a Spanish teacher at Crittenden, and we are interviewing for a Spanish teacher at Graham right now.
And those are all my questions. Thank you, President Wilson.
Thank you, Trustee Wheeler. I believe Trustee Gutierrez, since I can't see you, I'm going to assume your hand's up and the floor is yours, please.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Madam President. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So here's well, I got two concerns, right? Before, I don't think we're going to be by 10. I feel all.
Trustee Gutierrez, it may just be my connection, but I'm fairly certain that folks may be having trouble hearing you. I see a lot of nodding heads in here.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Awesome. Hey, so
Yeah.
it's like 9:55. I think we have to extend the meeting unless you've already done that.
We have.
You have?
We have not.
Okay. So should we do that first and then I can ask my question?
Absolutely. Please, someone make a motion.
Okay. I make a motion to extend the meeting until 10:30.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion to extend the meeting until 10:30 passes unanimously. Trustee Gutierrez, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So I've got a quick question. Ellen addressed a couple of my questions already, which is great. Thank you, Ellen. So my question is pretty simple, Dr. Rudolph. And if Devin already brought this up, apologies, but I wasn't online. My question is, are we planning for the worst case, which is not to just be in distance learning for this first trimester, but for the rest of the year? And if so, are we going to be building off of the platform we currently have? And should we start looking at platforms for the future, for next year in general, to be on the safe side? And if so, can we get that going?
So we are planning. We contingency plan for the worst case scenario. In terms of platforms, though, I don't think the platform, all the feedback that we received, although I know there have been some members of the public who are a little upset about the platform. It's actually not the platform that's the biggest concern, but it's about how instruction is delivered and the lack of grading and the facilitation of assignments back and forth, right? And so we have planned for those across the board, and we'll continue to monitor that to determine if this is the right approach.
Okay, and then one other question that I have is regarding sports. What's the county's ruling right now on fall, winter, and spring sports? Have they given us any updates on that?
We haven't had that much updates. I know CIS made a decision about which sports they were moving, but the county has not given us official guidance on which sports we can do and which sports we can't. Obviously, we're looking at, if we have to adhere to social distancing guidelines, we have identified several sports that we can do in person, cross country, track, and a couple other ones. But we have not we haven't heard from the county specifically about what we can and cannot do. We do know that PE cannot take place as it stands right now. And so there's some adjustments and some more guidance we're waiting for.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Appreciate it.
Sorry about that. We will now open it up to questions from the public then, if there are no additional questions from trustees. Do we have people on the phone line? I see Trustee Conley's hand up.
Well, no, I was just going to say, it's comments from the public, not questions from the public, right?
Pardon me, yes.
We can't respond to any questions posed, but we can take them into consideration.
We're opening this up now to public comment. I don't see any hands raised in the chat room. Oh, wait, I see three. I apologize. I see three. Thank you. I needed to scroll up. I see three, and I do believe we also have 2 comments online that were submitted ahead of time. So I think given the fact that we've extended the meeting, let's give everyone at least 3 minutes, unless anyone objects. We'll have 3 minutes per person online. Jenny, followed by Kathy Scheck, followed by Steve Song, and then the 2 folks online. I see Laura Blakely's hand up.
I'm just curious, we only extended it until 10:30, so we just have 31 more minutes. Will that be sufficient? I want the public to speak, but I'm wondering whether we should have extended to 11.
We may have needed, that's 15 minutes for the public and 15 minutes for trustee comments, unless there's a ton of things to be added for future board meetings. We can open it up to trustees to say if they think I should diminish the amount of time up to let the public speak.
I think we can make it.
Okay, let's just get started and see how we go. So Jenny, can you please, someone please unmute Jenny, and we will accept your public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Jenny.
Yeah, my name is Jenny Schroeder. I have, well, 1 middle schooler still in the district, and my son is about to start high school. So first, I'd like to thank Dr. Rudolph and the district staff in terms of looking for spaces during the days for the children of essential workers. I think that's, you guys deserve a huge congratulations for that. And I think that's exceedingly important for our community. What I wanted to provide comments about, I have a concern about the virtual teaching team and the fact that they'll be providing their own curriculum instead of leveraging online curriculum and being focused more on answering support or answering questions, clarifying concepts for the students who choose full-time distance learning, even once we return to stage 3, where in-person is a possibility. And I was just doing some math, and I'll send this to you guys in email. There are supposed to be 4 virtual teachers for middle school, 1 for each subject. So what that means is the middle school science teacher will have 3 grades to provide videos for every day. So that's 3 videos on different science topics per day, 15 videos on different science topics per week. And I've made some assumptions based on a 20% opt-in rate, with roughly 330 students who may have questions about one of those 15 videos. The math question is even more difficult because of math tracks. Because of the 2 math tracks in 6th grade and 3 math tracks in 7th and 8th grade, that would be 8 different math videos per day, 40 math videos per week, and still finding time to be available for students with questions or who don't understand comments. So while I completely agree with reopening and remote only, I really question the value of that virtual team as proposed, and I would challenge the district and the trustees to find a more optimum way to make those teachers available for student questions and support, as opposed to recreating curriculum. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jenny. We'll move on now to Kathy Scheck. Kathy, if you could unmute yourself.
Hello,
Thank you.
can you hear me? Can you hear me? Well, I'm not Kathy, I'm the other half here, but same household. My name is Salvador. So I have a few quick comments. First of all, I want to very quickly say that thank you for all the work that you put. I know that this is a very hard situation and you're definitely doing your best and putting a lot of work. A very quick comment. I've heard several times reference to essential workers as mostly or pretty much referring to healthcare workers. And I just wanted to point out, I would love to hear the people who are feeding us at grocery stores, et cetera, consider essential workers, because I'm lucky enough that I can work from home. But if it weren't for those people, I wouldn't be able to eat. And they do have very serious needs too. That's one thing. The other thing, and some of this has been already addressed, but I really wanted to insist. Looking at the schedule, we have a first grader. Looking at the schedule is frightening. I mean, I'm an adult. I spend many hours a day in meetings, and by the end of the day, my brain is toast, and I find it very hard to do any actual work when I've spent so much time sitting in front of a computer. And I would like to echo the sentiment that I've heard already, that perhaps we should try to do something slightly different as opposed to trying to jam similar contents to what would be done normally. I think we need to get ahead of this problem because we're in for the long haul. And speaking of engagement, we also have to realize that most of the effort to keep the kids engaged is going to fall on us who are at home, who have to work. I cannot put my daughter in front of the computer for 6 days on and off with breaks and everything you want and expect that she's going to do what we expect her to do. She's going to do what she's going to do. And that means she's going to be looking at the corner of the screen, thinking that she's listening, but she's not listening. She's paying attention to something else, etc. This is how kids work. This is not just one kid, or every kid is going to be doing something different. And considering the amount of engagement that this is going to be requiring from the parents, we need more flexibility. The fact that we have such a strict schedule, at least that's the way that I'm reading it, is going to make it almost impossible for either of us to work, and we need to work. That's one feeling that I have. That something that worked in the prior the last few months is that at least we had the flexibility to work with her. When I didn't have a meeting, I would sit and maybe do stuff with her, math stuff that she should have done yesterday, but now it's when the time that I can sit down with her and make it work. That's how we were able to make it work. If the approach is too inflexible, it's going to be a nightmare. And we're talking about a whole year. I agree that this is going to be at least half a year, not a year. So we really need a flexible approach. We would really appreciate that. I know that I'm running out of time, but there's something also that I would like to say. I would really love if the district considered having a later schedule. The reason why school starts so early in the morning.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarado.
Your time is up, sir. I apologize. If you could email the rest of your comments to the trustees, we would greatly appreciate it. We need to move on, though. We would do the same thing in an in-person live meeting. We have timed comments. So your 3 minutes are up. We'll move on to Steve Song. If you could unmute yourself, please, Steve.
Hi, thank you. So a couple of quick comments. One thing that I would like to see more detail on is the kindergarten schedule. I'm assuming that their schedule will be a little bit shorter because it's typically shorter by an hour. My suggestion is that it would be even shorter than just an hour shorter than the regular day, because I don't think kinders are going to be able to be in front of the screen for all that long. Another comment is about for once we do get out of stage 4 and we're back into stage 2 or 3, that whatever metrics you use provide some sort of safety margin to give the highest probability of staying in stage 3, because I feel like one nightmare scenario would be to move to stage 3 and then 2 weeks later whiplash back to stage 4. So, whatever metrics you use for that, have it be something that gives us a pretty good chance of, being there for at least a trimester or whatever. I'd like to say, hearing about the daycare at campus, I think that is fantastic. Yay, keep working on that, and make that as big as possible. And I'd also like to sort of give a +1 to the previous caller's comment about flexibility for the day's schedule, because I understand that some families could do with more rigorous schedule. I think a lot of other families could do with more flexibility. So I think if we can come up with a plan that accommodates both of those modes, that would help a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Song. I believe there are 2 comments that were submitted that we can go ahead and cover at this time. Dr. Rudolph?
Yep. So the first comment is from Mike Lerner. Recommend the board evaluate whether to adjust the school calendar for the 2021 academic year to consolidate school breaks to facilitate compliance with the current county health requirements. For families that require daily child supervision, the school calendar requires them to violate the 3-week minimum stable cohort requirements. This creates a higher infection risk for students in the event of in-person classes or the broader community in the event of virtual distance learning. One, student, family, and teacher staff travel during breaks creates a higher risk of significantly increasing the rate of COVID-19 infection in the community. Number 2, families that do not travel often require childcare to continue working. Number 3, the current health guidance requires maintaining stable cohorts for children for minimum 3 weeks. Number 4, the current school calendar has a 3-day break at Thanksgiving, followed by 3 weeks of school, then 2.5 weeks for winter break, and then 1 week break for February and again in April. Families that require daily childcare cannot possibly attain the childcare during these breaks that meets the county health requirements, regardless of whether classes are being conducted virtually. An adjustment to the school calendar could include consolidating the breaks into a single 5-week break from Thanksgiving to New Year's, eliminating the February and April breaks, and the January compensate, adjusting the last day of school to meet the required number of days. Maintaining the school calendars as is makes it impossible to meet the pandemic's current health restrictions. It will be irresponsible under an in-class instruction scenario and is counterproductive even under a distance learning scenario. I urge you to consider the merits and practicality of making an adjustment to the school calendar with the one above as an example to protect students, families, teachers, and out-of-school child care providers. Thank you, Mike Lerner. The second one comes from Lori Schertzer. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. To whom a concerned parent of 2 young elementary age children at Bub School. My questions are, do you plan to complete the waiver to open schools, which is allowable considering Mountain View itself does not have high numbers, and the numbers causing Santa Clara County to be on the watch list are from the East, San Jose, and South. Number 2, when, not if, schools open, do you have fears that the teachers union will strike, or they will honor their contractual agreement with the city and teacher continue to work at their jobs during this time, as others have as well? Number 3, if you do not plan on filing a waiver to open schools, when do you plan to open under stage 3? Santa Clara is currently off the watch list. Please provide your detailed timeline of how many business days after the 14 days currently required by Newsom you will need to get the kids into classrooms and operate under Mountain View Wisdom Stage 3 model hybrid. Thank you for your response in advance. Regards, Lori Brody.
Thank you,
That
Dr.
completes all the comments.
Is that all the public comments? Okay. We
Yes.
will move on now to comments from trustees.
I have a quick comment.
Trustee Gutierrez. I need you.
Thank you. So I just want to reiterate, thank you to everyone for having the time to be able to problem solve this as best as we can. But I want to strike urgency to the issue of many of our Latino parents who, as you may or may not know, a few of them in my neck of the woods, at least, both mom and dad are not working. So there is a situation that's growing here of inequity, but also the gap may increase. And so therefore, I would like to see all the resources we can pull to help these families out, whether it's reach out or from the SCETS as well, or other members of the community to make sure that these kids aren't lost in the system and that we can provide as much help to them as possible, considering that not all of our teachers speak Espanol. Thank you.
Trustee Blakely.
I just wanted to lever off of what Trustee Gutierrez just said, and that this is not exactly on point for the reopening thing, but if there are families who can no longer afford their housing and are moving in with, for example, relatives in Sunnyvale or San Jose, they need to let the district know if they want their kids to continue to attend Mountain View Wisman schools, so that they can qualify under the McKinney-Vento Act, and we can accommodate them so they won't have even more disruption in their lives. So I just wanted to, get that out there.
Thank you, Trustee Blakely. Sorry, I keep turning off my camera. My son has decided he's got to have a third and fourth dinner. I know other hands are up. I just really quickly, given a recent, one of the recent comments, want to say that it's my understanding that we are tentatively looking at about 396 potential spots for kids of essential workers, which is not limited to healthcare workers alone. I do believe, and someone can correct me if I am incorrect, but I do believe that includes teachers and other folks who are unable to work from home. And we're doing our best to figure out how to find more of those spaces. But that's the latest figure we have. Again, it's tentative, but the district staff has been working diligently to figure out how we can make this work, especially for our most vulnerable families and for a wider swath of what would be termed essential workers. I'll move on to other comments from trustees before I add anything else. Trustee Conley, your hand was up, and then Trustee Wheeler.
I was going to say Trustee Wheeler's hand was up before mine.
Trustee Wheeler.
Yeah, so I mainly just want to second what Trustee Gutierrez said. It's very troubling to me, we've been hearing about equity for all day and, for a long time. To understand that there are parents who can pretty easily help their children at home or join with other parents to help their children at home. And there are other parents who cannot do that. So, in whatever way the district, could, provide, some extra assistance with that, I would support that.
Thank you, Trustee Wheeler. Trustee Gutierrez, I cannot see whether you have your hand up, so I don't want to discount that you may have other thoughts here. It's just really challenging not being able to see you.
No worries. Sure, no problem. So the only other thing I would add quickly, because I know we're running out of time, is also to follow up as best as we can, as quickly as we can, too, with our current homeless student population. Verify if they're still here, if they need help, and help them with distance learning as well, because I'm sure if the parents who called in are having problems in their own world, which are valid, I'm sure these kids are facing a little bit more than that.
Agreed. Good point, Trustee.
Thank you, that's all.
Gutierrez. Thank you. Trustee Conley, I saw your hand up. I may have missed somebody who was ahead of you, so help me out. My screen, I've got people on both sides and my glasses probably need updating.
No, I think we're okay. So first I want to thank all of the district staff and our superintendent, because we're not just planning for one school year right now, we're planning for 4 possible school years. And part of that is with completely new technology, safety requirements. Our teachers are planning for 4 different school years. Our staff are planning for 4 different school years. So I really want to appreciate all of the kind of heroes out here working hard to try and figure out a way to make this happen when guidance changes every 48 hours. It's mind-boggling. It's really overwhelming. I wanted to point out that our city numbers may say one thing. So right now, Mountain View has 174 cumulative cases per 100,000 population, we have 174 cumulative cases for a 100,000 population. We have 215 that rate, but our teachers and our staff are not just from Mountain View, and they're not just from Santa Clara County. They're from all over the Bay Area. And so we need to think about this regionally. We need to look at regional numbers. I have great faith in our Department of Public Health, our public health department here in Santa Clara County, but this is not a county specific issue because people come in from everywhere. As we move forward, I want to focus on engagement. So how we're meeting students where they are. And we know that some students are going to interact with computers and screens differently, and how we reach out to them. Teachers as people, our staffs connecting with families to make sure they get what they need to be able to participate in distance learning. I want to focus on connections, so building relationships. If you have an incoming kinder and it's their first year in school and they're going to meet their teacher on a computer, that is a whole new ballgame, right? But how can we build those authentic relationships with our children, between our teachers and our children? And then quality, that we are committed to trying to pull off a high quality distance learning environment. And the way we do that is that our community keeps giving us feedback. So all of the communication we're getting from parents, please email us, please call us, please reach out and let us know what your children are experiencing and how we can improve it. And then finally, I'm hoping that we can find ways for our parents to support each other as a community. And that, you know, there are great examples of this. At Mistral, there's parents who coordinated with Reach Potential Movement, and they have been raising funds to give groceries and other essentials to families in our community from Mistral and Castro and the Latham preschools every single week. They've been doing it for 8 weeks now. And that partnership is really powerful. And we're going to need to keep giving, like making available food and resources to families as we move into distance learning. So how do we keep doing that? But also, how can all of our parents in these different circumstances support each other? So, you know, I'm going to the PTA president's meeting next week because I want to talk about, like, can we figure out ways across our district that, you know, if you have 2 people working from home and you're trying to figure out how to balance this, can you bounce ideas off of other families in the same situation? If you're a single parent and you're trying to manage 2 kids in different grade levels, can you bounce ideas off of somebody else in the same situation? How can we problem solve and really help each other as a community? Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Conley. Trustee Blakely?
I already said my piece. I do want to thank everybody who's had input to this plan, though. Everybody at the district and all the parents and teachers and everybody who's been involved in the focus groups and task forces. This has really been a Herculean task, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we implement it in the very best way possible.
Thank you, Trustee Blakely. Trustee Wheeler, any additional comments?
I was going to ask if you want a motion.
Oh, not yet. I haven't made my comments, but I'll try to be brief. I want to like echo what has already been said. This is a Herculean effort, and it seems like every week the target changes. I want to thank the state for coming through with the latest legislation, which enables us to live stream classes. While the schedule that we do that with may not fit everybody's needs, I'd like us also to recognize that a lot of our teachers may have families of their own at home and need to know what their set schedule time is so they can help their children with whatever learning opportunities they may need. So there's just so many moving parts in all of this and needs that we may not be thinking about. I mean, I am a full-time working parent. I have a single parent and I have 100% custody. So I'm not immune to the challenges that parents are facing. I have meetings, I have to schedule, I have to try to keep my 9, now 10-year-old engaged. And it's a challenge. So this is not something that I think our trustees in general are not thinking about deeply and personally. There are barriers we're trying to change. The state is helping us, and no system that we come up with, no matter what we do, will fit everybody's needs. And our target is often moving. But I just hope we are all patient. We work with the systems that we have, and we maybe emerge from this whole thing with strengthened social engagement with the connections that we do have. And however that may look, that may be site specific, that may even be neighborhood specific, but I know we can get through this. we will do the best we can to implement distance learning, and it may not be perfect. I think we all need to recognize that. But we will learn along the way, and we will do our darndest to make sure it's the best that we can do. And community input is critical. And parent support with workable solutions is always appreciated. Please, like Trustee Conley alluded to, send us emails, let us know your thoughts, whatever support you may have. Sometimes we may have to redirect you to the site. That does not mean that we are pushing you off. It's that might be where your ideas and talents are best served. I know the principals are looking forward to working with parents. So there's a lot of opportunity space, and I hope we try to take advantage of that as we move ahead. So with that, I believe Trustee Wheeler was ready to make a motion.
Yeah, I move that the Board of Trustees approve the Mountain View Westman School District reopening plan, which consists of 4 stages.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and a motion moved by Trustee Wheeler and seconded by Trustee Conley. The motion passes unanimously. In the sake of time, I will try to breeze through what we have next, which is item 8, board updates. Hopefully, unless there's anything pressing, we can all email any updates we may have to Nancy Rodriguez. Unless there's something somebody would like to publicly say, Trustee Conley.
The Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors has released funds to the County Office of Education to provide devices, hotspots, and data plans for 15,000 families across the county. They expedited it in light of what happened at the state level. So, thank you to them and to everyone who's been working on this issue.
And thank you, Trustee Conley, for your work on it.
Thank you, Trustee Conley. Absolutely. We'll move on now to item 9, items for future agendas. I believe we will have an equity piece coming up either in the next meeting or the meeting thereafter, and we will have additional information on what our stages for reopening will look like, including a phased approach and what teachers can expect. So we all look forward to receiving that new information as the district office is working on it. And future board meeting dates are listed on our agenda. Our next meeting will be August 6th. Followed by one on August 20th after day 1 of all distance learning school. And with that, I will adjourn this. Oh, wait, sorry, Trustee Blakely, I see you.
You skated right over items for future agendas. And I wanted to propose that we put another Brown Act session, Brown Act training at some point in the fall. I think our last meeting was very difficult and people were challenging that we did not telegraph about the superintendent's contract in advance, and I would really appreciate more Brown Act training in terms of what we can and cannot say, in particular with respect to what I was going to say, personnel contracts.
It is in response
items.
to your comment. I'm curious if you think that training should occur before or after the next election, because the board could look quite different. And they will be making and addressing these same decisions at some point in terms of contracts, changes to any contractual things or other closed session items. So I'm happy to include it on a future board item, but I'm not sure about the timing. But I'm open to ideas. I'm happy to do it sooner rather than later, but it's something to consider. Trustee Wheeler?
Yeah, so I was thinking the same thing, that we should wait until after the election so that the new board members get this training as well.
I'm open to that, and it probably makes sense logically. I would like the information sooner rather than later.
I think it's really good. I think I understand the approach and the rationale, absolutely. So I see a thumbs up from Trustee Conley. I'll assume a head nod from Trustee Gutierrez. So thank you for bringing it up. Unless anyone objects, and we can, I would say it would be an excellent idea and agenda item for once there's a new board, but I'm happy to push it up. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So again, we have the future board meeting dates, and I apologize. I'm looking and reading and trying to look at the screen, so I missed you when you asked to add something on that. So apologies for skating through. But I think we are now at the end of the board meeting. And so at 10:27, I will adjourn this meeting of the Mountain View Wisconsin School District Board of Trustees. Thank you all, and thank you for everyone online for your patience.
Good job.
Thanks.